There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Bookmaniac. Welcome back to my channel and to another episode of Zooming In, where I talk to bookish social media luminaries the world over about articles about book-related, literature-related topics online. And I'd like to welcome back for her maybe 107th appearance on my channel, but first on this series, the wonderful Chris from the wonderful book podcast, The Book Cougars. Chris, welcome back.
Thanks, Shawn. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always
I'm
happy to chat with you.
I'm so excited to be chatting with you about this particular article because it is about our relationship to the unread books on our shelves. And the article was in the Washington Post just early September. The headline is that unread book making you feel guilty? You're Not Alone by Stephanie Mary. So I have many things to say, and we probably didn't even need to read the article, and we have so many things to say about unread books. What did you
Right.
make of the article, or how would you like to start this chat?
Well, I'd like to start it by saying everything I say today is based on how I'm feeling and thinking as of this moment in time, because I think my emotional relationship with books is constantly changing.
I know that's so relatable. Yes.
I mean, when I was younger, I think well, okay, when I was younger and I first started really seriously reading, it was always an adventure, to find the next cool book or get a great recommendation from a bookseller or the librarian, or, as I got a little bit older, from the adults around me. And then I became an English major, and it was still an exciting process, to start going through the classics and everything. And for a while, I did have guilt when I was a bookseller, because there were just so many books, and you don't read a lot as a bookseller. I mean, you do, but not as much as people think you do, because, you're working at least 40 hours a week, if not more, selling the book. So you read a lot of snippets of books. And so I went through a period then, I think, when I felt guilty.
I don't feel guilty about unread books on my shelf. What I have noticed is that because I'm reading more and more at this stage of my life, that I'm reading a lot more of the books in my library than I ever had before. So the portion between read and unread books is changing, but
Mhm.
I'm not stressed out by having unread books. There's a distinct group of booktubers that track how many books they bring into the house and how many are remaining unread on a monthly basis, and their goal is to get their TBR down to zero. And
Mm,
I just don't relate to it at all. I love having scads and scads of unread books all around me for when the time is right for me to read them.
right. It's a comfort in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And I'm not as spontaneous a reader as I used to be, but I remember maybe 15 years ago, my practice was that I wouldn't really think about what the next book would be until I'd finished the current book. And then I would just, one of the most delightful parts of my reading life at that time was just to wander through my apartment, looking at all the unread books on my shelf. And the one that caught my eye, the one that kind of jumped off the shelf figuratively, would be the next one. And I
Mm,
loved that. I don't, I'm got everything all planned out with buddy reads and readathons and this and that, that I don't get that experience very much, but it's quite a joy for me. So I
yeah.
need to have a lot of unread books around to make that happen.
I think when I feel guilty about books now, it's when my books are out of control and very disorganized, because so many come in from, advanced reader copies to books I purchased to books from the library. And sometimes things get rather out of control. Let's just put it that way. It's like books have exploded in my little home office here. So that is when I feel guilty, because I feel like they're being neglected somehow. But once
Yeah.
everything is a little bit more organized, at least in stacks, you can see a stack behind me there. That's a stack of fiction and then nonfiction arcs that I want to get to. and then I also bought a new bookshelf recently, just to get a little bit more organized. So now I don't have any kind of guilt around books. It's more excitement. Sometimes it's overwhelm, and I have to manage how I set up buddy reads and the commitments I make, because I don't want it to become too much like, a work project.
That's right. That's always a
Yeah.
fine balance. So I'm going to see if I can do this. I can't relate to what you're talking about at all. Can you see my?
Yes.
No, actually, you can't see the chair. There's a electric recliner behind me, my reading chair, but it's really a place it's kind of a catch-all for books. And when I'm doing a Friday Reads or some kind of a video in this chair, I often just toss it back there. And somehow it triggered the recliner. There were so many books on it that it triggered the electric recliner in the middle of making a video. So yes, I can relate to your feeling of being overwhelmed very much.
Yeah. But this article was, interesting to me. I think you and I are of an age where we've kind of read all the different sorts of articles that can be out there about books in some ways.
That's right.
And
One of the things about this series is that often the article just is just a little bit of a trigger for a conversation that we don't even really need the article. So yeah, I understand that.
yeah.
Um, but do you have any books that are unread for any of the reasons that are mentioned here, where it's just too intimidating, or you keep it around with no intention to read it for a particular sentimental reason, or I like some
Yes.
of the points that were made about that.
I do. Yeah, I did too. I mean, I really did. She has 7 categories here. So, life is too short. It's daunting. It's easy to put down. If you never finish it, it never ends. A fear of disappointment, a bad feeling, literally, and it's personal. And I'm totally old school, I printed it off.
You.
So I think in each category I have had, the feelings that other people have written about, because we should say this is from they asked their readers of the book club newsletter that they host at the
That's
Washington
right.
Post.
That's right.
For some of the books, and the life is too short thing. In there, she's talking about, big books that you have that are sitting on your shelf, and there are new shiny books coming up all the time that pull you away. And this totally made me think of Jenny from reading Envy, and her tagline, "I'll have what you're reading."
I'll have what you're reading.
Because it's so true. You're sitting there and you see a new shiny book. So that is a big thing, I think.
It is, and I have developed a bit of a complex about finishing tomes. So I have so many unfinished tomes, I can't seem to get through to the end of them because they're just too big, they're too long. I also have dozens of others that I just haven't tried for the same reason. So very much related to that.
Yeah, I did too. And I think one of the examples is the autobiography of Mark Twain that somebody had requested as a gift, and she received it, and it's sitting on her shelf. And she makes the comment that, it's a lovely cover, and that brought up the point too that, books are also objects of art, and they don't necessarily need to be read. I know we're here talking about reading, or we're readers for sure.
Yes.
But we can also appreciate beautiful books. And I think having an unread book on your shelf that's just beautiful, maybe if you're feeling guilty about it, maybe you can kind of turn that into appreciation of the book as an object.
Yeah, one of the most comforting maxims I've heard in recent years is that reading books and collecting books are 2 separate habits, 2 separate hobbies. So
Yes. Yeah. And some readers are collectors, and collectors can be readers, but I've met collectors who really don't read the books that they're collecting. They read other things, industry reports and whatnot. But I was really surprised to learn that as well, because I thought everybody was like me. They saw a beautiful book and they wanted to read it.
Well, you have been recently, at least, and I think not just recently, reading a lot of books that are very daunting. So you're a trooper.
Well, I read Ulysses this year, which
Yeah.
definitely, it was listed in this article as one that people find intimidating. But, it wasn't one that I ever really thought I'd read. I just had no interest in it. It wasn't one of those classics that hung over my head. But I got interested in it when I was researching women booksellers this last semester. And Sylvia Beach published that book. She was a bookseller in Paris who got behind that book and was the one who published it. So my interest in her, and then other woman booksellers who were behind this, got behind this book and were ordering copies to sell in their bookstore, it made me curious. Why? What was it about this book and James Joyce that got these women so interested, especially when like Sylvia Beach was a lesbian. So it wasn't like she had some kind of sexual tension with James Joyce in that regard. It was really about the artistry of this novel and the newness of the style that he was attempting.
Well, what you've just said is far more interesting to me than anything I've ever heard about the novel. I probably will never read the novel, but
Yeah.
how did you feel after having read it? Did you think it was worth it?
I don't really know. I made some jokes about, that,
Uh,
it's true. Like everything everyone has ever said about Ulysses is true. And a lot of people have called it a big waste of time, and other people consider it a masterpiece. I had a great feeling of accomplishment when I finished it. That is undeniable. And you feel like you're in a secret club, or a small club of people who've actually read it. So there's that. I don't think it's a book to be read for pleasure necessarily, at least not the first time. I know people who've read it multiple times or who read it annually, and it becomes a pleasure for them. But that first
well,
reading experience is more of being diligent and following a reading schedule for me is what helped.
well, hats off to you, Chris. You read it, so I don't have to.
Yes.
I was particularly interested in the category, if you never finish it, it never ends.
Mm.
And that is for series, for completist readers that they read every book by their favorite author who's dead,
Mm-hmm.
except the last one. And then they don't want to read that last one because then once they've read that, they won't have there's nothing else to read by that author. Do you relate to that at all?
Yeah, I can in some ways, because I'm a big Willa Cather fan, and
Oh, I
I,
have kind of gathered that over the years. Yes.
yes. And when I had that one book of hers, the novel, I should say, that I hadn't read, I thought, well, it's time. I want to read this. It's set in Canada, Shadows on the Rock. It's a
That's right.
historical fiction based in the earliest days of the colonization of Quebec.
Yeah.
And so I've made a challenge out of it, and I read one of her novels a month to get to that final novel because she wrote 12, very convenient. So it was a big moment in my reading life to finish that last novel of hers, because that's it then, as far as novels go. And there's a different pleasure in having read somebody's work completely to be a completist, but there's also that is it a desire or a longing, or what did they call it in here? I guess they didn't call it, that was a different category, the disappointment category, which I think is also a real thing
It is.
for both of those categories, right? Because if you have one novel left by a favorite writer and you read that one, what if it sucks and you don't like it?
Yeah. Barbara Pym I've been a completist with her, and I have read all of her novels. And
Hmm.
I don't remember having any special feelings about the last one that I read. It was a collection of unpublished novellas and short stories, and it wasn't my favorite thing by her, but I don't remember having any special feelings of sadness or that, oh, now it's all over. There's nothing left to read. There is a published diary of her. Excerpts from her diary and letters have been published in book form, and I haven't gotten to that one. So I've still got one left, and maybe I'll leave that for years to come for the sentimental reasons.
How many did she publish? I've only read one or two by her so far.
I'm gonna say 7 or 8,
Okay, yeah.
something like that. Many of them she wrote early in life and weren't published until near the end of her life or posthumously, but I think but the grand total was about 7 or 8.
Okay. But did you sit down to read it with a sense of something different? That was it a different reading experience for you to sit down with that book?
I think if I thought about it, if I remember, I thought maybe I shouldn't have left this one till the last because it wasn't up to par. But I'm now embarking on rereading them, or I don't know if I'm going to reread them all, but I've reread 2 of them this year, and so it never ends, especially with my memory. It's all new. It's all new all over again.
That's a good thing. Sometimes, knock
Um,
on wood.
the Cromwell trilogy we were talking about in another video just a minute ago. I haven't read the third of that. Have you read Cromwell trilogy by Hilary Mantel?
I have not, but it's one of those that's vaguely almost on my TBR.
I think knowing your interest in British history, I think you would just eat that shit up, as they say.
Oh yeah, I read the first page, I think when the second one came out, and then knowing that there was a third one coming, I didn't read it. So I think I'm going to have them for a rainy day eventually.
That's my feeling for the third one, and apparently it's as good as the first 2, which I love. And yeah, maybe 2024 will be the year.
See, that's the thing too. Like when she passed away, such sadness. And one of my favorite writers when he died, Pat Conroy, that was another thing. Like he's somebody I've read all of his work, and then he passed away, and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
the fear of disappointment. I did get a chuckle out of this because in the fear of disappointment, talking about somebody, you read a book by a writer and you really love this novel, and then you pick up another of theirs, but you're afraid of being disappointed. This is the example that was given, John Boyne. And that's exactly what happened with me with him.
Really? I was
Oh,
just about to come in here and say that's exactly what happened to me with him.
see,
So
look
much
at that.
so much so that now when I talk about The Heart's Invisible Furies, which was my top read of 2017 or whichever year it came out, when I refer back to that, I say John Boyne accidentally wrote one really amazing novel.
I love that book too, The Heart's Invisible Furies. I really enjoyed that so much. And it was one of my top reads of that year. And then I read This House Might Be Haunted.
Oh, I don't know. I've never
I
even
think that
heard
was the
that one.
title of it. It was a haunted house book, and I love haunted house stories. This book, I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads. I double checked. I think I just said like this would possibly be a good novel for people who haven't read many ghost stories, particularly a younger person maybe, because there are just too many jumps in logic. And I mean, even for a ghost story, a haunted house story, there was just too much going on there.
I read 2 others that I hated, and I've put up very ranty video reviews, which I'll link in the show notes for people who haven't seen them. If you're not interested in hearing ranty reviews, please don't watch them. But if you do enjoy it, that they are some of my best work.
Nice.
I'll also put up my review to The Heart's Invisible Furies, which I filmed like as a hot take review. I still had tears coming down my eyes from having just closed the book and I turned the camera on. So that was a completely different kind of review. So put them all there so you get the whole spectrum of my reason.
I'll have to check that out. I look forward to watching that. I don't think I saw that one. I got to meet him. He did come to the States on tour for his book, House of Special Purpose. He was in
I've never heard
Illinois.
of these 2 that you've mentioned. That's so interesting.
Yeah. So here, let me look. I did an event recap on my blog. And yeah, the House of Special Purpose, it was a story about the royal Russian family. And this was back in 2013, actually.
Okay.
So much older. And I did get a signed copy, but I never read it. And I looked through my shelves and I no longer own it. So I don't know what happened to it. But I do think that haunted house book just kind of trashed him for me. And is that unfair as a reader to say to say that based on one book.
Oh, well, it may be unfair, but it's exactly my, yeah, if I read one bad book by an author, I'll never try them again. And
Hmm.
I'm probably limiting myself with that policy or whatever, but Lord, I'm surrounded by books I want to read. So, life's too short. Life's too short.
Well, and that is the very, very, very true statement. Life is too short, and
Absolutely.
there are so many books to get to. I think the only other thing I'd want to mention is back again to the aesthetics of a book, the aesthetic quality of a book, because this number 6 was a bad feeling, literally, that like the book just doesn't feel good in your hands. The tactileness of a book. And I
That's
think
right.
that is so true for me. If a book doesn't feel good in my hands, I mean, there have been times when I've gotten the digital copy because of that. But I do know when a book feels good in my hands, like when it opens well and it just has that certain tactileness, that makes you even happier to go pick it up again when it's time to read.
I relate to that so much. Maybe the last thing that I want to say before we bring this to a close, that we could probably talk for another 2 hours about this topic.
We
It's such a
could.
big topic. Is one of the ways that I'm tackling, I think that's not quite the right verb, but one of the ways that I'm dealing with this issue in my life is in January this year, I made a video of, I think it was like 7 or 8 books that I had to read in 2023 or on haul if I didn't get to them because they'd been hanging around so long and they weren't books that fit in any readathon or any this or any that. And I've been making my way through them. And it's been
Nice.
really enjoyable because one or two of them have been really powerful reads that I wouldn't have got to if I didn't set that as a project. So I'm going to do the exact same thing next year. Stack of books that have just been on my shelf the longest that I'm just going to say I have to get to these this year or get rid of them.
Oh,
So
that's a great
that's
idea.
a fun way to keep things moving along. So Chris, what a delight. I hope you'll come back another time and we can talk maybe about bailing or genre fiction or who knows what we might
Oh, I
talk
would
about.
love that. Yeah, I mean, I'm still keeping in the back of my mind that you did say you would read a genre novel that I recommend to you. That if I recommended a handful, you'd pick one and read it. Do you remember that?
I don't think we ever met before. What's your name again? Yes, I do remember that. I will honor that
All right.
because I don't want to get on Chris's bad side. Chris, thank you so much.
Oh, always my pleasure, Shawn.